Today we got a Star Wars RPG talent tree guide and review from Force and Destiny, the Endless Vigil Sentinel Career Sourcebook. Investigator talent tree is a knowledge slash cunning focused character, you know, the navigate the criminal underworld, use your cleverness and various crime stuff type of character, which is always good. Knowledge isn't quite enough to base an entire tree around you. Well, I mean, it could be, and some trees are really good like that, but typically, if you're going to be the knowledge guy, you also want to be something else, so, you know, it's a perfectly fine hybrid, I guess. Really, I kind of feel the same way about the navigate the criminal underworld aspect, so it meshes fairly well to have these two together. Also makes for a good character concept. You're really smart from an intellect standpoint, and also clever. Sort of a Sherlock Holmesian kind of talent tree. So first of all, we have some basic help with a wide variety of checks that are sort of within the themes I was just describing. We get help, let's see, knowledge underworld and streetwise, vigilance and perception. A lot of basic help with all those, and a little extra help with perception under certain circumstances. So you're just a little bit better with perceiving your surroundings. We also have a couple different ways of using your cleverness instead of something else. So for one, you have that decouple a skill from its normal characteristic and use a different characteristic instead, in this case, cunning. So if there's a decent reason you could come up with why your cleverness and cunning would help you with that mechanics check or combat check or whatever, then, you know, you could do that, which really, as far as this type of talent goes, it's easiest to justify using your cleverness to do a check. I use my cleverness to solve a problem. Like, do I even need to describe how? Doesn't it kind of go without saying? I'm just cleverer. It just makes sense. A lot easier than I use my presence to shoot someone. We also have a talent that will allow us to, a bit more often, but still not all that often in the grand scheme of things, substitute one knowledge check for a different specific knowledge check or a cunning-based check. Most of the time you'll probably rely on the cunning-based check. In general, this is a very cunning-focused tree with a little bit of intellect thrown in, but you can cover most, or at least a lot of your bases, by just focusing on that particular knowledge check and that particular cunning-based check, and occasionally use one of those. It might differ depending on the situation. One might be more appropriate instead of the normal knowledge checks, which just is really helpful, and it is kind of good that they get this early on, because unlike some roles, like, there are so many checks that you would be expected to be competent in. I mean, if you're the combat person, grab a weapon and then focus on the skill that uses that weapon. I mean, I guess you could have a backup that uses a different skill, but, like, you could just have a backup that uses the same skill too. Like, you don't need to. Are you really burdening yourself by having an extra blaster rifle or something? Or if you are just normally good with the smaller, lighter, easier to carry weapons, like, you just have a spare pistol, and also your main pistol, there's not much of a burden there. And even with talking, you can get a lot of mileage out of just focusing on some of the talking skills, not all of them. Here, though, it's hard to say, like, what knowledge skills will be the front runner. It depends on your campaign, and it just feels like there's less flexibility there. Like, I can decide to talk my way out of something in a deceptive way, or a charming way, or a coercive intimidation way, and, you know, maybe some people might respond to different types of checks differently, but, you know, I can make that decision. You can't just say, like, oh, I'm not going to use knowledge lore to solve this ancient Jedi puzzle or something. I'm going to use knowledge underworld. No, you can't do that. You can't make that decision to do that unless it makes sense to, or if you have a talent that allows you to do something like that, and it makes sense to. So yeah, it's sort of making up for the natural weakness of this role. So it's nice, although, while it's nice that we get it this early, I don't know, there's not a whole lot for you to focus on with this tree. I don't know how hurting are you gonna be for help with a wider variety of knowledge checks, and there is something that I wish would come a little sooner. Let's just get to that, shall we? Valuable facts. This is a really great talent where you can use a knowledge check in order to introduce information which will improve someone's check as long as it's all relevant. I know that alien species, I know their weakness, they're in their third molting phase, so the armor is softer on their right side or something, and so I get a little extra help on my attack check against them, or you know how to heal them with a xenology check, or know information about the criminal underworld and their bosses and what they care about and what's the best way to talk to them with your knowledge underworld check. you know, whatever else. And you can do it a couple times over the course of a session, so that's nice. Because of your character knowledge and intelligence and your real-world creativity, you can have a decent amount of fun on a pretty consistent basis, be useful in a variety of ways, creative ways. It's nice. In fact, I kind of want to house rule switch this one with the last talent I was talking about, where you can substitute one knowledge skill or other cleverness for the other knowledge skills. Just switch the placement within the tree, because that valuable facts is really consistently useful. It's great for a knowledge character. They're going to get more joy out of the game if that's quicker. And it's not breaking the game, that's for sure. We also get some decent talking defense, at least as far as deception goes, with an unrelenting skeptic talent, so they have a harder time of deceiving you. We also have some regular defense. Grit and toughened. A solid average amount, I would say, of grit and toughened if you were a combat tree. If that was what they were doing and this is what they had, and maybe one other, like an active defense. That would be a nice solid amount of defense for a combat tree, but it's not really a combat tree. So yeah, it's pretty okay. So finally, we get to the Sherlock Holmesian analysis of a scene, kind of. We have 3 abilities which sort of deal with that investigative scene sort of a situation. First of all, one of them is an improved version of Street Smarts, which we have multiple ranks of, and it's one of those like perfectly okay, boring kind of early talents we've seen numerous times, but now, out of nowhere, we have this improved version, which is really, really useful. You can do a check, which is really, really hard to pull off, but you can do a check with actually one of 2 different skills. It's your choice, and I guess maybe on the situation it might depend which one you can use. But you do a check, really hard to pull off, and then GM just gives you a piece of information that's relevant and useful, and they have a guide on what the information should be, how useful it should be, how game-breaking it shouldn't be, and that sort of thing. There's some guidance on that, which is nice. And I say it's really hard to pull off, but not really, because the difficulty actually goes down based off of your ranks in Street Smarts, so the more ranks you have, and it's not like you really have to go to another tree to make it even easier, really, because you got a lot of ranks of Street Smarts. By the time you actually get to this talent, you're probably not going to have a very hard time pulling off this check. By the time you actually get to this talent, you're not exactly going to have that hard of a time pulling this check off. Finally, we have Reconstruct the Scene and Sense the Scene. They're both very similar in how they work, similar check to pull off. One is using your forciness on top of it, the other is just using your basic observation skills to analyze a scene, a crime scene or crime scene-like type of situation, figure out what's going on. In one, you get to learn information about general characteristics of a person that was there, and maybe multiple people, depending on how well you roll. Sort of from the footprint, it was a Wookiee, and it was actually a big Wookiee, and they had a limp that you could tell that like they're overweight. They're really heavy because of the weight in the footprint, like it's too deep. Fat Wookiee with a limp came here, and also they had diabetes. A fat, diabetic, limping. This is a sad picture I painted. And the other one, you can sense the emotions of people, or multiple people, depending on how well you roll. So between those 2 things, you can kind of put a scene together. It almost feels like it could be, potentially at least, so hyper-specialized, and you'd be so good at it, like with this information, it'd be easy for you to just have everything you need to know, where it's like, okay, we come across a crime scene, alright, well, I'm gonna go on a snack run, you wanna come with me? Okay. And someone else is like, oh, I'm gonna go take a dump, and then the GM and that one player who's left is just doing their investigative scene. They're doing their 2 checks to use these 2 talents. Maybe they're doing the improved Street Smarts on top of it, and okay, I know everything. I'm gonna tell y'all what happened when you get back from your breaks. Right, you want to be careful not to create scenarios where it's just like one player can take over and everyone just goes on autopilot. Okay, so this seems like it could be an okay tree, though I don't have the book, but I think I remember, was it Skip Tracer from the Bounty Hunter source book? That was a non-force sensitive investigator kind of a character who is probably more interesting. If you want a force sensitive investigator, I guess do this one, or take Skip Tracer as a second specialization. I don't know, I don't find this to be that interesting. I don't think it'll be that fun to play. It's certainly better if you do that house rule switching of the talents I said. Having a bit more consistent help in some interesting way early on would definitely be beneficial. What we have now is just helping you with knowledge checks, which what else are you going to do What else are you going to focus on? How much help do you really need? It's all just helping you with the roles themselves really early on. It's a while before you get anything interesting. And like I said, depending on how these scenes that these would apply to are constructed by the GM, it might not be all that interesting to play, either for you or all the players or both. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like there are better ways to get this type of character. Again, I don't remember Skip Tracer. I think I like Skip Tracer a heck of a lot more. I just don't remember why. Yes, we will revisit that one too, though. Anyway, if you do want to play one, Cunning, definitely get a 4 in Cunning, 3 in Intelligence, probably a 4 in Intelligence. There's nothing really else to focus on. You might as well get a 4-4. At least you're going to be really good at these things. Or, I don't know, maybe 3 in a combat stat. You don't really have anything that's going to help you with combat at all, career skills or talents or otherwise. Oh, you can add a debuff, a one-time, every now and again, debuff onto someone's whatever check. Yeah, I really don't think this is the most interesting tree to play. Certainly not the most interesting tree to talk about, which is why I'm going to stop right now.